welcome to the TipHaus Insider webinar for Mastering Cash Tips. We're going to be going over clarity around cash tips, all the controls that you have at your disposal, and some best practices, some way that we see people kind of using TipHaus in conjunction with their unique cash tip operations to kind of make the most of TipHaus and do some fun things. My name is Michael Corson. I'm the manager of customer success here at TipHaus. If you've been to one of these webinars before, you'll know the drill, but I'll go over a little bit about how this looks. We're going to start off with just some housekeeping. There is a live chat off to your right. So go ahead and drop your name, where you're coming from, say hello to everybody. We generally get people from all over the country and Canada and elsewhere. So we love to hear who you are, where you're joining us from, all that good stuff. If you have questions as we proceed through the webinar, you can drop those questions over there as well. I have Jason from our support team. He is over there answering questions in real time. Any questions that are kind of reserved for the whole group that would be good for everybody to hear, we'll put some stars on, we'll bring them up at the end and we'll talk through them. And then at the end of this webinar, there's going to be some links to future webinars, some other resources, some ways that you can reach out, all that kind of good stuff. If you do have to hop from the webinar at any time, don't feel bad. Restaurant industry is a very busy industry. I know people get interrupted all the time. So if you do have to hop off, we'll send you a recording so you can catch up on anything you might have missed. One extra piece of housekeeping today. If you look up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a little QR code with a duck in the middle. That is a QR code that's tied directly to a Earn Tip Access informational meeting. So a little bit about what I'm going to touch on today is going to be our payout program. If at any point you've thought about maybe paying out your employees quicker or wondered about what this Earn Tip Access page is, this QR code is the easiest way to get started. So go ahead and scan it if you're interested. It'll just take you to a link. You can book a short meeting. Should take about 15 minutes to go through what's your employee count, what's your use case, does this seem like a good fit for your business, and kind of walk you through everything to do with Earn Tip Access so you know if it's a good decision for you or not. That is 100% free product for businesses. So just a bells and whistle add-on, something cool you can do to make sure that your employees get their tips faster. I am going to jump right into the webinar. And the first thing I want to talk about is kind of how does TipHaus interact with cash tips? And this is a little bit different depending on what your POS system is, or where your labor is coming from, or kind of what you want TipHaus to do with your cash tips. So I want to answer just two basic questions for you, just to give you an idea of what your experience might be, depending on if you're a Toast customer or a Shift 4 customer or a Micros 3700 customer, whatever it might be. You understand kind of the different ways that TipHaus can interact with cash tips. So where are cash tips recorded and why? And where can you see your cash tips in TipHaus? When we talk about getting cash tips into TipHaus, really what we're talking about is getting the cash tips into the reporting page. So I'm going to hop over into my demo account. If you've been in these webinars before, you'll recognize my fake restaurant Bogey's Bonanza here. And down here on the reporting page, you'll see the work shifts tab. I do want to point out, you'll see a new tab here, Sales V2 Beta. This is a really, really cool new sales table. You'll see your general sales table still lives here with all the information you're used to. But I really want to focus on this work shifts tab for now. We'll have an entire webinar over these new reporting tables. They do have some awesome functionality to allow you to save filters, get easier access to your data, to quickly drill down to the data you need to repeatedly drill down into. So we're really excited about that. For today, this work shifts tab is going to be your kind of one-stop shop for cash tips. So when we look at cash tips here, you'll notice they come in on the shift level, which is a little bit different than most tips. Most tips are going to come in on a sale, and it's going to say, hey, this is the sale amount. This is the amount of tip that the guest left. Most labor systems and POS systems, they drop cash tips to us on shifts. And that's just the nature of POS systems. That's the way we get the data. So this is the way we display it. You'll notice here that none of my employees here have any cash tips in. In TipHaus, when we talk about cash tips, there's kind of a few different ways that we can get them. So number one, your POS system or your labor system may send us those cash tips automatically, in which case they will just sit here. If you ask us to do nothing else, those cash tips will just sit in the cash tips column. We could put them on a report for you. We could do anything you'd like us to do, but by default, they will just sit in this cash tips column. They will not go into an employee's take home. They will not go to that employee for payroll or anything like that. If your system does not give us cash tips, there are still some ways to use TipHaus to leverage your cash tips. That could be something like dropping cash tips in here. So I could come in here and I could say, hey, Ashton Ebert actually did declare and turn in $50 in cash tips, and he needs to have that here in this cash tips column. Similarly, what you can do is you can build a drawer for the day. A lot of people do this where they'd say, give me a spot where I can drop in the day's cash tips and then build a pool for those tips or something like that. So there's the manual entry method. There's also the method where we get it directly from your POS system. There's also a way for the employees to declare their cash tips directly in the employee app. So if I was going to take Ashton as an example here, and I was going to pop into his employee app, it would look something like this. And if I come to this second page to see his shifts, I can click on these different shifts and I can see any cash that's been declared. Now we can turn on this feature, which would allow the employee to declare their own cash tip amount. They're able to do that going back 72 hours. So Ashton could come here and say, oh, on 3/8, I did have some cash tips, and he could type in that amount, $1,000 in cash tips or whatever he got. Hopefully he got $1,000 and submit it. And then that would show up in the TipHaus dashboard. So lots of ways to deal with cash tips. If you were told on your onboarding, we don't receive cash tips from your system, and you've been doing something manual or something on the back end to kind of handle those cash tips, do be aware there are many, many ways we can get cash tips into TipHaus. Anything from putting it on the employee's shoulder, similarly to how they would declare it at the POS or at the labor source, to building a manager function and saying, hey, managers, you just need to get the single cash number and put it into this field once a day, something like that. So lots of different ways to do cash, lots of different ways to get it into TipHaus. In terms of where you see cash tips in TipHaus, there is this cash tips field. This would be where you'd see it on a shift by shift basis. On the breakdown page, you would come in here and you would go to the current pay period. I'm going to refresh really quick and relog back in. There you are. So if you were on the current pay period or on the yesterday filter or anything like that, you can come to this customized table columns view when you're on the show more view, and you can turn on your cash tips, and this would just show how much has been declared. There are all kinds of fun cash columns we can turn on. We can include it in its own take-home column if you're going to send those to the employee's take-home. We can leave it here in the total cash tips column if you just kind of want to see what they declared but not necessarily pay it out or anything like that. Which kind of brings me to my next topic, which is what can we do with cash tips once they're in TipHaus? So if you took nothing away from that spiel, just know there is a way to get your cash tips into TipHaus. If they're not already flowing in automatically, definitely, we can help you get that set up if that's something you want to do. So when we talk about what do we do with cash tips once they're in TipHaus, there's really three main options. And then some fun extra functionality that we can go into past this point. So when we talk about what do you want to do with your cash tips, there's kind of three options we can talk about. There's reporting only, or there's 0% distribution, but send it to the take home, or there's use rules and do distributions on it like you would do for a credit card tip or a service charge or something like that. This first one is the easiest one. This is how TipHaus operates out of the box. It's also probably the least useful way to do cash tips. It generally leaves it somewhat in the employee's hands to handle the cash tips. You're not going to be using any math. You're not going to be using anything other than the reported cash value for any kind of payroll purposes. So what this would look like in our case, like I just saw, is we would leave every feature off. We would pull in the cash that the person brought in. So for Ashton, it was $50. Maybe Leon got handed some cash tips as a host. And as all we do is we just leave that value in the cash tips field. So if you go to the breakdown, you would see the total cash tips column. Nothing with this cash under the system is sending this into the employee's take home at this point. It's just being reported and then left in that column. We could put that on a payroll report for you to say, hey, this employee did, in addition to all the other tips in the take home, they got this $50 in cash. Typically, this system is great for people who are having their employees walk with the cash, but do want to report it properly to the government for tax purposes. So this would be something like, hey, Ashton got $50. He put that $50 directly into his pocket and then walked out the door. But when we do run payroll, we might want to include this cash value to let the government know that he's already walked with that amount. So that's the kind of first option. If that's what you're doing already, no problem. That definitely works. Getting into some of the more interesting options, we have 0% distribution. So this is very, very similar. What we do is we flip a feature on the back end. And what we do with that feature is we say, any amount that's declared in that cash field, whether it came from the POS or whether the employee put it in through the employee app or whether a manager typed it in, just send it directly to the employee's take home. And so the feature is called include declared cash with take home, and it does exactly what it sounds like. Whatever value is in that cash field goes directly to the employee's take home. Fantastic option for employees who are going to turn in their cash. So they're going to say, hey, I got $50. I'm going to turn that into the manager, declare it. It's going to go directly in my take home, and then I'll get it back on my paycheck or get it back when I click the payout button for the Earn Tip Access employees. Fantastic option, especially, if maybe credit card tips are left on the sale and those need to be distributed through the house. Maybe a cash tip is more of a personal thing at your restaurant and somebody slips the host a $20 bill or something, and that's because the host did something special. Lots of restaurants do this. Depends on how much cash you're getting, but definitely an option. You could have the employees turn this in and then get it back on their paycheck, and then taxes would be handled normally. The third option here is the full distribution method. So this would be cash gets distributed and the rest gets sent to take home. So with this feature, it essentially turns your cash tips into another source that TipHaus can calculate on. So if you take this server, I can come in here to the tip distribution rules and I can build a rule. And without a rule in place, it's not going to send the tips to the take home unless you ask us to. We can make that happen. But maybe the servers need to tip out the bussers. And they not only need to tip out the bussers from their credit card tips and service charges, but they also need to tip them out from their cash tips. So if we turn on cash rules for you or cash features, you can make a rule that's specifically tied to cash. Very easy to come in here and say, hey, 10% of any cash that server declares needs to come from the server and go to the busser or the host or the expo in this case. We set that up. The rule's labeled in a nice green color so you can keep it separate from your other rules. You can filter for your cash rules. But now the server comes in, they declare $50, they turn that in at their till in the end of the night. It takes 10% of that, sends $5 off to the expo or the busser or the host or whatever you set up the rules to do. And then the remainder of that cash would go off to the server's take home. So very, very handy and very, very flexible. You'll notice when you build cash rules, there are some limitations. Again, because we're not getting a sale open and close time, we can't do some of the distribution frequencies like time of sale or things like that. But we can do daily by default and say, hey, this is the amount of cash that came into the server for the day. This is the amount of time worked under a busser or an expo or a host. So calculate that way. You can also put schedules on this kind of stuff. So you could say, hey, any cash that's declared on a shift that happens between store open and noon goes to people who were clocked in between store open and noon. Any cash that's declared between noon and close would go through and go to people who were present during that time period. So we can't do time of sale directly. We can put schedules on these rules to get pretty fine with our calculations for cash. This is a fantastic option. What it does for your staff is it allows you to reduce the amount of time at the till at the end of the night and to somewhat demystify the cash process. There's always going to be some kind of honor system with cash where employees are getting money, they're putting it in their pocket, and they're either going to tell you about it or tell the government about it or not. And there's always the chance that there's funny business going on there. With this kind of system, you can track your cash tips and you can at least get a sense of like, hey, what does an average cash day look like? And somewhat keep on top of it and say like, hey, every server on average gives me $20 in cash, but one server routinely leaves me $0 in cash or something like that. So you can somewhat keep on top of it, but there's always going to be the honor system at play. The benefit from just having the employees turn in their cash and type in a number, or turn in their cash and tell the manager, is they're not sitting there at the end of the night going through cash, doing till procedures, doing really much of anything, or balancing out their till and saying, okay, how much of my cash sales did I get, and how much of my tips can I take home? Or, I need to leave everything that's credit card tips and service charges because TipHaus is going to distribute those. But, I do need to take some portion of my cash home for myself, or I need to take $100 in bar cash and split it between these other bartenders. If you can get to a point where your servers and bartenders are just putting their cash in the till, it generally reduces the end of night procedures significantly. So over time, not paying people to sit at their till and do math, but just paying people to do their work, drop everything in a till, put down a total, and walk out the door and clock out. So definitely some business reasons for from doing this. From a bartender's perspective, I was a bartender for a long time. Closing up the restaurant at 2, cleaning it up by 2:30, leaving by 3 o'clock, and trying to do math after a full shift or after a double is where human errors happen as well. So reducing the amount of math that somebody has to do when they're burnt out, tired at the end of their shift, some definite, clerical errors that will be avoided in that system as well. I'm going to come back to the slides here and talk about one more cash feature. This is called paid cash. This is earn tip access friendly. There are a lot of interesting ways to use this feature. Anything from operational things that you do every day to one-off situations where you need to maybe give somebody an advance or something like that. What this feature does is it allows you to have another column on that work shifts tab where you can type in an amount of cash that the employee has already been paid, or really just any amount that the employee has been paid outside of TipHaus. So you can imagine this kind of working in a scenario where maybe you have to give a employee a cash advance. They come to you and they say, hey, I really need this money. I can't wait for payroll, or I can't wait for tomorrow's payout, or for this or that. Or can you give me a few $100s up front so I can get through this emergency and then take it out of my tips going forward, something like that. This cash paid feature allows you to quite easily just come in here, grab the employee of your choice, and tell TipHaus how much you've paid them. So you could say, hey, I gave this employee $100 in cash. It will adjust their take home so that they're not going to get paid that $100 again. It will log that they have been paid $100, and we can include that in your payroll columns to make sure that flows correctly. And if you're using Earn Tip Access, it will actually reduce their following payout amount by that $100 that you were paid them. So reduce the amount payable to keep everything in line. So this is just a way to tell the system that your employee has walked with some amount of money from their credit card tips or from their service charges in some way. That's just to get your wheels turning on that. I'm not going to go into every single scenario. I've seen this used in many, many different ways for many different problems. If you have some kind of scenario in mind where you think, oh, this is definitely touching on a problem that I have, reach out through support, reach out after the webinar, send me an email personally, whatever it might be. Somebody can help you walk through this feature and find out if there is a solution here with this cash paid out feature for you. Again, this is really up to the creativity of the business, the problems they're encountering, the operations that they do. But yeah, a lot of fun possibilities with this cash paid out feature that weren't necessarily possible even 6 months ago in TipHaus. So one of our new favorite features, definitely a lot of power there if you need it. I want to talk a little bit about cash. You're probably recognizing that there's a lot about cash that is unique, a lot about cash that is different, more flexible in some ways than credit card tips or service charges. So I want to talk a little bit about cash entry as a creative tool. This is something we probably only talk about with customers when they reach out to us and have a need to get some extra tips into TipHaus, or there's some missing value or some third-party system where tips exist and they're not in your POS, so they're not coming over to TipHaus. When that happens, we go into this cash entry as a creative tool conversation. I just wanted to kind of demystify that and talk about it as a group, and maybe just let you know this is possible if maybe you've been doing some kind of manual operation for a long time. because you didn't know about this. I definitely want to make you aware of it. And then you can bring your specific issues to us, again, through support or through email or however you want to reach out. Somebody will help you. So the idea with cash entry as a creative tool is that you can inject extra tips into the system. So typically with TipHaus, you're looking at the labor system, you're looking at the POS, and you're saying, okay, any tip that's there on any sale that's there in your POS is going to come into TipHaus. It's going to run through the rules, and it's going to spit out a number that I can either pay out on ETA or I can put on payroll. But what happens when you use a third-party system like a triple seat for events or a ticketing system or some kind of off-site POS system to ring a major event? Maybe you go off to an off-site catering event and you ring it on in a different way. Well, there might be a big chunk of tips there. They don't exist in your POS. They're not coming over to TipHaus. They're not getting calculated. They're not going to the employee's take home. And so what we find is that people open up a spreadsheet. They go back to their old systems. They start doing the math manually. They figure it out a way to get those tips to their employees outside of TipHaus. 100% something you can do. But with cash tips, what we can actually do for you is we can build you custom employees and we can build you custom shifts. So this might be as easy as saying, here on the work shifts page, I need to schedule a shift that happens every day. And this is going to be under Leone. And Leone is our event coordinator, and she's going to ring all the sales or something like that. We give this shift a unique job code. For now, I'm just going to give it a server job code, but we could label this something very unique. Custom server would be perfect. Or maybe event server or offsite event or something like that. We fire off that shift and we say every day, fire off the shift for this person. And then all you would need to do is come in here, drop the cash amount onto that fake employee shift, and then build a rule from that unique job code to give it out to your staff. So you could take a $1,000 tip from an offsite event, dump it under the fake employee, and have the tip distribution rules take it from there and run with it. Extremely easy, extremely effective. And because of the way our cash tip rules work, you can actually have this work just for that event employee. So the only tips, unless I turn on include declared cash with take home, the only tips that will go to the take home are tips that either are sent to somebody here or the remainder of tips that are coming from this job code. So if you wanted to say, hey, for all my standard employees, they're going to walk with their tips. I don't want those going to the take home. But for these special events, I do want whatever number I type into this specific field to go into the take home. We can set it up just that way. So if a server was to accidentally declare tips, TipHaus doesn't send it to the take home. But if any manager comes in and specifically tells us there is a offsite event tip that needs to go to the staff or something from Triple Seat that needs to go to the staff, you can type it in, send it to the take home, and do away with those spreadsheets entirely. This is incredibly effective for many, many scenarios. If you have any specific ideas about how you might use this at your restaurant, definitely same advice I gave you before. Reach out, ask for a meeting. We can help you out. We can talk through it. We can figure out what's going to work. All right, we're coming up on the half hour mark here. The general purpose of this webinar is just to get your your brains turning on different ways that you're doing cash now, understanding what the options are in TipHaus, how you might eventually move away from cash concerns. So accuracy of cash tracking, incredibly huge benefit of getting to a place where you can get your employees off of doing math at the till and get your employees into the habit of just counting a till. Still an opportunity for an employee to make a mistake when they count a till, but much less so than if they're taking cash out and trying to balance it and giving some out here and giving some out there. So moving away from cash concerns, value number one, just reducing error. The other aspects of moving away from cash concerns that's really valuable, if you can get to a point where you can have your employees drop the cash, is you're going to reduce the manual work that the employee is doing at the till. And so reduce the time that you're paying people to sit there doing a job that they're not really paid to do. You want your employees to focus on serving guests, providing good experiences, doing all that kind of stuff. Making sure everything's clean, everything's ready to go for the next day, all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily paying employees to stand at a till and do math or split up cash between bartenders and that kind of stuff. So obviously less human error, less risk of compliance failures or that kind of stuff. The one thing that cash does that I do want to highlight, if you turn it in rather than let the employees walk home with it, is you get the initial backlash from employees saying, well, I liked walking home with my cash. What am I going to do now? I liked having some money with me. This is where partnering this kind of a cash flow, where you're turning in cash and either sending it to the take homes or running it through rules. When you partner this with Earn Tip Access, things get really fun and get really interesting. So with Earn Tip Access, and again, if you haven't done so already, if you're interested in Earn Tip Access, scan that QR code. This is a way to pay out your employees their tips electronically with the press of a button. So very easy to get started. There's business benefits, everything from just being able to tell employees that you're hiring, hey, you have the option to get your tips on paycheck, or if you want to sign up for Earn Tip Access, you can get paid out next day. In some cases, we can even get this down to end of business day. So if you close up your restaurant at midnight and you want to pay out at 1 a.m. or something like that, talk with us. We might be able to get that started. Incredibly big business benefit to just say, hey, up to you. You can either take your tips on your payroll or we can give it to you early. Definitely keeps employees from going across the street where they give out tips in cash or something like that. Makes you, more competitive as an employer. For the employee side, this is really what we built it for, to give employees a chance to get tips electronically, quickly, so that they're not walking around with a ton of cash in their pocket at 2 a.m. or having to go to ATMs and do deposits all the time or go to their bank or that kind of stuff. We also built it with freedom of choice, so they can link a debit card, link it and get it there for a small fee, or they can sign up for our house money card. Fantastic product, helps build credit, get it there for free. Totally up to them how they want to do it. They can opt in at will and opt out at will. From a business registration standpoint, really all we ask for is details about your business. We ask for a bank account to link, just to make sure that you can move money in the US and that somebody who owns the company is signing off on it, and that we know which account we're going to pull the tips from. But there's no float up front, nothing like that. When you pay the employees, TipHaus pays the employees directly, and then we fire up an ACH for the amount that we gave to the employees. If there's ever an issue with that ACH or insufficient funds or something like that, we just reach out to you directly and say, hey, we pulled an ACH for this money we paid your employees. Let's work through it and let's get to the bottom of it. That kind of no float approach is fantastic. From an employee perspective, very, very easy. If you're going to link a debit card, it's about 5 minutes. If you're going to do house money, ideally about 10 minutes. If you're opening a new account like that, if we do need to verify your identity, you might have to take another 10 minutes to maybe upload a document, but very, very easy. And if you are going to sign up for that product, you do get a virtual card on day one. So no funds building up for the week where you're waiting on your physical card. You can use the virtual card, link it to your phone and pay digitally. Fantastic feature. With this and cash in play, essentially all of your credit card tips, all of your service charges come in. They get calculated out. They go to your take home. The employees are sitting there at the end of the night. They say, okay, I had $50 in cash. They drop it in the till. They give you a total. They walk out the door. And then from a manager perspective, you come in, you check your page, you click payout, and then you move on to the next day. So extremely easy, extremely hands-off, and really just kind of a perfect match in terms of reducing wasted time at end of night processes. Yeah. If for any reason this got you thinking about a new feature, or maybe you want to change things up, next steps would just be get in contact with us and we'll help you out directly. We can schedule a meeting. We can get you set up with everything you need to make the most out of TipHaus. Okay. Thank you for listening to my spiel. Hopefully this was helpful. Have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next time.